Well, we talk a lot about creating passive income on a monthly basis, which is a huge benefit to short-term rentals. And they do that a little bit in arbitrage as well as ownership, but never underestimate the ability to create the equity and the appreciation in your properties.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Moore, and we're back with the Whiskey Wednesday episode with Mr. Dave Savolich. What's up, brother?
Hey, man. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
What's so funny?
I don't know. I just feel like I'm excited about today. I don't know. I feel like it's been a while, but it's only been a week. So
it's only been a week. We're back in action.
We
just had our buddy George stop in. He brought us a bottle of Blue Label. That's our unofficial sponsor, and George is the official sponsor for bringing it in for us. So what do we got? What do we got going today?
Well, let's just give you a little bit of an agenda as we start off today. So we're going to talk a little bit about, one aspect of the economy and how we're spending our money. Okay. First of all. Second of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the ROI on a property and kind of the expectations. We're going to have a couple questions. We're going to talk about arbitrage and co-hosting and how that plays into our world and what we believe in that. And then just a question on property managers and kind of converting from maybe an old to a new property manager and some of those insights. So hopefully you guys stick around and those are unique and interesting topics. So you want to
let's dive
get started?
Yeah, let's get started.
First and foremost, we travel. You and I, we like to travel. We do monthly meetups with our Odyssey members. And so we're on planes every once in a while. Not a ton, but a little bit. But the skyrocketing prices in airlines are crazy, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I see it firsthand because my daughter's playing soccer all over the country. So we've been to Florida, California. They just got back from Virginia. And so it's hard for both my wife and I and Sophie to go on all these trips.
Yeah.
Like I hate missing them. But when you buy a ticket to Virginia and it's $900 or $800 per person, it's like, I mean, that's a significant trip when you get a rental car and a hotel for 4 or 5 days. And I know you travel a lot too, and you're taking the family, and even using miles, it's getting crazy and almost out of control. Like what the heck?
Yeah, I think I saw a report that said in June airline prices went up in 1 month almost 25%. Crazy. I mean, that's nuts. They came down. It felt like they softened a little bit, kind of the first of the summer, and then just skyrocketed back up. And I mean, they say it's citing fuel. The fuel costs have gone up and the operational costs have gone up. I mean, fuel has been pretty stable to my knowledge most of the summer. And so it's interesting. And I think that it's a supply and demand issue, right? I have not been on a plane or an airport recently that is not packed and is not crowded. And so, I mean, to me, it's just kind of business one-on-one. They can say it's operational costs are going up, everything else. We run businesses. We push prices on things. We have properties that we test where the market will allow us to push prices to. I think they're doing the same thing to the American consumer, saying, hey, listen, you guys aren't stopping traveling. We're going to continue to raise the prices because the last reports I've seen from most of the major airlines, they're all pretty profitable right now. And I think it's just a matter of people are continuing to travel and continuing to say, hey, listen, despite the high prices, we'll keep going. And, in our world, though, at some point, the consumer's going to say, man, you're with Sophie, you're not, that's not like a vacation.
Right.
And you're dropping, $5,000 to go watch a soccer tournament, right? Not that you don't want to do that, but that's an expensive weekend tournament, right? Yeah. And, at some point, people are going to say, hey, listen, we're going to choose drive-to destinations. We're going to do those things. And we've, in our world in short-term rentals, we built our portfolio around drive-to destinations because we don't want to be reliant on the economy, which is, can people actually afford to fly to our places? Mm-hmm. And that's just a choice we made. But right now, we're not seeing a lot of pullback from the consumer. So, I mean, until you see pullback from the consumer, I think you're going to see those prices continue to go up.
Yeah. And I mean, it's evident the last time, the last 10 times I've been on a plane, there hasn't been an empty seat next to me. And if there is one, man, you feel like you hit the lottery. You're like, you got to be kidding me. Like I got a middle seat that's not open. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Right. The second point is, I think you made a good point is, short-term rentals. One of the great things about short-term rentals is people are always going to vacation. And whether they fly or drive, they're going to use them. So if it gets to the point where they're like, well, we're not going to fly to them, people are going to drive to them.
Yeah.
People are going to drive just like they did in COVID. They're going to drive to these locations. People are willing to give up a lot of things. They're not willing to give their vacations.
Right.
Like they're going to still vacation and they're going to still go and spend time with their family. So that's,
and there's very few, like even our Vodacy collective portfolio, right? We've got people that in our Vodacy family, we've invested in a lot of different countries, out of the country, but majority of our properties are domestic U.S. properties.
Yeah.
And any domestic U.S. property, lower 48, the majority of your customers are coming from the major metro areas that are 2 to 4 hour drive from there, right? And so most people are not actually flying to our properties. It's one of the things that, on the airline topic, and I know this wasn't really the point of you bringing it up, but I've heard some people ask me and say, how is that going to affect your business?
Right.
And I'm like, well, the majority of our customers are not flying in to come stay at our properties. Most of our portfolio is 2 to 4 hours outside of a major metro area, and that's where people come from, right? Most people are actually driving anyway. I mean, we have some people that will fly in, right? But the majority of our customers and our guests that are staying in our properties are driving to them anyway.
Right. Yeah. Good. All right. Let's jump into a trending topic. It's kind of in a form of a question because I think it leads right into the conversation. But why don't you, or Vodacy, why don't you teach arbitrage co-hosting along with your vacation rental home ownership strategies? So why not co-hosting and arbitrage?
One, really simply, it's not worth it. It is absolutely not worth it unless you own these properties. And what I mean by that is there's some major benefits of real estate, and the biggest benefits of real estate only come if you own the property. Like I believe, like co-hosting arbitrage, it's a cash flow type of a model, right? You're saying, hey, listen, and those that are listening, just hopefully most people have heard that term a lot in our space, but just so you know what it is, co-hosting arbitrage is basically going out and finding somebody else who owns the property and saying, I'm going to give you an arbitrage model is I'm going to give you a certain amount. Like say I'm going to pay you $1,500 a month. I'm going to rent your property, pay the mortgage, whatever you're agreeing upon. You're going to pay a certain amount to that person who owns the property, and then you're going to make whatever the difference is in what you can go short-term rent it out. So you're basically going to go rent it out, and you make that arbitrage amount, right? That's what arbitrage is. Co-hosting could be a little bit different, where you partner with the homeowner and you become kind of the management partner. You're saying, hey, listen, I'm going to partner with you on this. I'm not going to guarantee any rent payments or anything like that, but I'm going to go out and rent it out on the short-term rental side, and then I'm going to take a certain percentage, that you agree upon, right? And so, to me, co-hosting is just a glorified manager, right?
Exactly.
And so, those are business models. Co-hosting, right? In neither one of those models are you an actual investor. All you are doing is
you have no ownership either.
You have zero ownership. So you don't get the tax benefits, you don't get the appreciation benefits, you don't get the depreciation. Those are three major movers when it comes to the ROI with real estate.
Right.
So if I'm going to not own the real estate, I'm going to figure out another business to get into that I can do a better cash flow model, right? I don't think that these are the best side hustles, if you will, arbitrage co-hosting. You can do much better. If you're going to be in real estate, be an investor, own the properties, right? That's where the benefit is. That's where when I say the juice is not worth the squeeze, that's what I mean is the amount of effort I put in is not worth the output or the whatever I'm going to gain from doing that effort unless I own these properties, right? The biggest benefit is ownership. And I just have yet to see anybody that starts in that arbitrage, starts in co-hosting that does not say, after a little while in it, I've yet to see somebody that's like, this is my long-term play. They say, I've got to own these properties. Right. We talk to people all the time that start in that space, and they say, well, Shawn, why don't you teach it? A lot of our competitors teach it. They teach co-hosting, arbitrage, and ownership. The reason I don't do that is because even though we understand the game of how to co-host, how to arbitrage, because we understand the short-term rental game, we understand what we're selling, we understand how to get, stand out in these crowds, that would be a recipe for success with co-hosting or arbitrage. Problem with that is I don't do it. I don't teach anything I don't do. But I also, you're going to make way different decisions when you're making decisions on something you actually own and have a mortgage on and you've got this long-term commitment to it versus something you could walk away from tomorrow, right? And it's not your property. It's not your problem. It's not your mortgage payment. And your decision-making is way different. You're willing to invest a lot more time, a lot more effort, and put in the things necessary to operate at the top of the market much more likely if you own the property,
right? Because
you're vested in it, right? It's like saying, why don't renters go in and make big home improvements? They don't do it because it's not theirs. Right. you have to do certain things. You have to pull certain levers to operate at the top of these markets. And most of those levers you're going to pull, you're not going to want to do that to somebody else's property because they're improvements and they're investments into that property. And so unless you're going to get the long-term benefit of that, you're not going to do it.
Right.
And so I'm not going to teach people to do it because it's not worth it.
Right.
And everybody I know who starts in that gets out of it and starts to own properties. They realize, hey, if I'm going to stay in this game, if I don't own these properties, I'm an idiot, frankly. Like they look back and say, I wish I would have owned these properties sooner. I don't want to name names, and I'll change the details up a little bit so people can't figure out who it is. But somebody that's very big into co-hosting, arbitrage, built a huge portfolio and making millions and millions of dollars in the 8 figures, and came to me and said, this is one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. I have this huge portfolio. His rents raised on him. He was renting big complexes. His rents raised on him. And all of a sudden, he's got an 8-figure top line business. And his bottom line, he lost $150,000 for the year.
Right.
And he's like, I've got these huge obligations. If I have an 8-figure top line business, that means $10 million or more a year that I'm making from my portfolio. Even if I'm breaking even and I own these properties, well, guess what? I have $10 million of debt service and note pay down and everything else and appreciation on a fairly large portfolio. He has none of that.
Yeah.
That money, that top line money that he paid out is purely expenses, and there's nothing left for him. Those properties, he didn't get the appreciation. The owners who he arbitraged it from get the appreciation.
Right.
Those people, the note pay down, all those notes are getting paid down from his $10 million plus that he's paying in that year. He didn't get any of that benefit because he didn't own the properties, right? And so even though on the surface it looks like he's got this huge successful business, he's losing completely losing money because and there's no benefit to him, even if he was breaking even or losing that money. What if you lost 150, but he owned those properties? A portfolio that has that much expenses, that's a large portfolio. He's probably gaining, $1 million a year, $600,000-$700,000 a year, high 6 figures, probably 7 figures in appreciation, even at 3 to 5%, because that's a large portfolio if you have that much debt service.
Yeah. Well, we talk a lot about creating passive income on a monthly basis, which is a huge benefit to short-term rentals. And they do that a little bit in arbitrage as well as ownership, but never underestimate the ability to create the equity and the appreciation in your properties because you buy a property today and 5 years later it's worth 100,000 or 200 or whatever more. Don't ever underestimate that's passive income and you own the property. You're creating that. That's huge. And that's not even an option if you don't own the property.
It's not even close to an option, right? You can get a really good return on an investment. And the argument will be, well, I don't have to put 10% down. I don't have to put 20% down. No, you don't. But you're never going to gain, that back end appreciation, depreciation, note pay down, somebody else buying these properties for you and paying for them, even on break-even properties. Right. And I'm just saying, the arbitrage co-hosting model, it's a cash flow model, right? It's a side hustle, if you will, or a full-time hustle, whatever it is. It's a business. It's a business model. I don't believe that the work you put in for the amount of money you can make in this is even worth it compared to other businesses that you could go do a side hustle in. Well,
and you talk a lot about, I can't remember the exact wording, but you talk a lot about what we're doing here at Vodacy is creating long-term wealth, long-term real estate wealth. That's the ability in our 5 years to freedom is you have 5 properties or 6 or 7 or whatever that, or 3. It doesn't, really doesn't matter, but that's creating long-term wealth in real estate. And you're not creating that. You just have another job. Right.
Absolutely. So, that's all you're doing. You're creating a job for yourself, a side hustle, full-time hustle, whatever it is, it's a job. And I can show you a lot of other business models that make you a lot more money than co-hosting arbitrage when you're talking about it just from a hustle, the side hustle standpoint.
Yeah, good. Okay, let's jump into a couple questions. This one came in our platform, and I'm just going to read it, and it's to do with the ROI. So what is a good ROI on a vacation property? Rates of returns vary depending on factors such as location, property type, and market conditions. However, vacation rental owners usually aim for an ROI of 8 to 10%. This ROI accounts for rental income expenses, property appreciation, and potential tax benefits. So what kind of ROI do you like? And this person is saying, hey, should I aim for 8 to 10? Is that okay?
is it okay for you, right? What are your investment goals is what I would say, first of all. So when you mentioned a lot of people look at their ROI based on cash flow. They look at it based on appreciation. They look at it based on tax advantages is what you mentioned.
Yep.
That's called your internal rate of return. You're combining all of these different places where you're getting a return on your money, right? A lot of people focus on cash return. What that means is if I put $100,000 in and my property cash flows $10,000 a year, I got a 10% return, right, on my money. And so that's a 10% cash on cash return. But what this question is saying is, what is the ROI, the total ROI, which would be more of the internal rate of return, combining your cash flow, combining your appreciation, combining all that. 8 to 10%, frankly, for me, in my property goals, in my portfolio, that would be really low, a really low IRR. Now, that would be a really good cash on cash return. So it depends on what type of return you're talking about, right? So, and I think that this gets lost and confused a lot of times in conversations.
I think they switch them up and say, oh, they're the same. I want this percent. And they don't really understand truly they're completely different.
Yeah. Like for example, I give you that example. Let's say I buy a $500,000 property and I put 20% down. I put $100,000 down, right? That property, if that property cash flowed $10,000, like I just said, my cash on cash return is 10%, right? My $100,000 in, 10%. But what if I was in a market and that property appreciated by 5%, right? So that property appreciated by 5% that year. So my first year, let's take just those two. Let's not talk about tax advantages or no pay down or anything else. Let's take those two for the example. Is I got $10,000 cash flow. So I got a 10% cash on cash return, but I want to know what my total return is, my IRR, my internal rate of return. So I take that $10,000, it goes up 5%. Very conservative appreciation in most quality markets, quality properties, right? So 5% that property goes up. Well, that property, that $500,000 property went up $25,000.
Right. So it's worth $525,000 now.
So now it's worth $525,000. So now my $100,000 not only gained me $10,000 in cash flow, it gained me $25,000 in equity. So my total IRR on that property is now not 10%, it's 35%. 35%, right? Yep. So that's where you start to, the real estate investors, and it goes back to the ownership model, right? All of a sudden you can see where I'm going to skyrocket past somebody in the wealth model and wealth building long-term in 3 to 5 years by owning these properties, because my cash flow was a really good cash flow. 10% cash on cash return in the short-term rental game is really good. Frankly, with rates where they're at, with prices where they're at, I look for properties in that 4 to 6% cash on cash return. Like even some break-even properties, because even if this property broke even, I still made a 25% return on my $100,000. Right? And it's a real return. Property values are real, right? They go up. That's where wealth is made. And so the question is, what do I look for? Like I'm looking for different things. I'm looking for metrics. I like properties that have a cash on cash potential of anywhere from 4 to 6%. So let's say around a 5% cash on cash return in quality markets, quality properties. I like to see above average appreciation, which average appreciation across the US is about 5% a year. I like to see markets that have above average, but so that, because I know that is a huge lever that's going to make a big difference in my wealth building journey and financial freedom 3 to 5 years from now. So I'm looking for markets in that, that historically have 7, 8, 9% appreciation instead of 5. That makes a big difference for me, right? And so those are the things I'm looking for. But I think in conversation, a lot of people are just talking about an ROI, return on investment, and sometimes they're talking about cash on cash returns. Sometimes they're talking about IRR. I mean, we have properties with an IRR of well over 100% return on our money and our capital on a regular basis, right? But we don't go out there and talk about that on videos because it's confusing to people, because they're like, how are you getting 100? Like you're putting 100,000 in.
It's cash on cash.
They assume we're talking cash on cash. So we talk about cash on cash on a very minimal, low basis, when a lot of people want to chase that and talk about it on the front end, when really that's not the biggest lever you're going to have when you're building financial freedom.
Good. Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, I think it's a great answer. Good insight there. All right, last question. If you are changing property managers, how do you keep 5-star reviews? That's a big one.
Yeah.
If you say you buy a property and you decide you don't like the property manager, or you're going to do a whole revamp and you're going to have to start over. You change a name. You're going to go from one property manager to another. What's the best strategy?
Yeah, it's so you're not going to transfer them most likely on the OTAs. You're not, if you change property managers, the likely scenario is that property manager has their own account on Airbnb, on Vrbo, wherever that may be, maybe on their website, and those reviews are going to stay with them as the host. The OTAs don't allow you to transfer reviews.
Why doesn't it stay with the property?
So
We're getting off topic.
No, I think it's a great question, because a lot of hosts are really frustrated. Like, that's a review of my property.
That's my property, not necessarily. I guess it is the host too, but it's a partnership.
And look at it from the OTA standpoint, because I actually think the OTAs have a very good point of not allowing that stuff to transfer, because we're in the experience business. The biggest part of that experience is how that property is going to get delivered to the guest. Well, if that changes, if that manager changes, the OTA doesn't have the confidence that the next manager is going to deliver the experience the same way. Well, all those reviews, you look at a lot of 5-star reviews, 70 or 80% of them are not even mentioning the property. They're mentioning the property manager. They're mentioning whoever that host is. They're saying, "Man, Dave was awesome. Dave he communicated so great." Like, a lot of them, the biggest thing they make comments on is communication. Well, the OTA doesn't know that new host is going to communicate the same way the old host did. So it could be misleading to the consumer, which they have a vested interest in, right?
That system, that strategy, that system created the 5-star review.
Exactly.
So now that's no longer the system.
Yeah.
So
we assume as a host, well, it's my property. They had a great time at my property. Well, that your property is only part of the experience. And we have to remember that, right? It's why I always say your property manager is the biggest and the number one relationship you will have long-term as a short-term rental owner, is that whoever's delivering that experience for you. And that's why they don't let you do it. And it makes sense to me. Like, I there's not a lot of things I agree with a lot of times with the OTAs that I actually agree with, and it makes sense. It's frustrating at times, because if you leave, you're not taking them with you, right? And property managers know that, but let's say you want to do that. So an indirect way that we do it is we take screenshots of all these people who say really great stuff about our property. And then we use that in our photos and in our description on the new listing. So even though we don't have a whole bunch of reviews yet, we still have third-party endorsement in our listing.
And they're real, and they're true, and they came from the previous strategy.
And our property, right? And we usually take the ones that they're saying great things about the property, right? If they're saying things about the host, then we don't use that one, right? That's because a lot of reviews say that, because that's not as applicable. But if they're saying, "Man, the location was stunning, I loved the way that the property was furnished and blah, blah," we'll use those all day long, right? And so we'll take those, we'll put them on our direct booking sites, we'll put them on our OTAs, and we layer them throughout the description and then in the photos. We take photos of them, screenshots, and we use them. And so that's what we do when we have to rebuild a new listing that was an existing listing that has some good reviews.
Gotcha. Good. That's awesome. I think that's a big question that a lot of people have, because they feel really bad, because part of maybe why they're buying this investment is because of the 5-star reviews and the successes had. But if for whatever reason they want to start over, change, they're like, "I don't want to lose all that." But that is a way. And part of just doing business is you gotta adapt and you gotta adjust, and that's just the rules we gotta play by right now. So,
right, you don't own that OTA. They have their own rules, and you're gonna play in their sandbox. You're gonna play by their rules, right? It's like you go to the neighbor's house and you play on their playground. You better follow the neighbor's rules. It's maybe different rules than your house. And so if you're looking at a new property and you're buying a new property, and it has great reviews and it's got a great reputation, a way to keep them is to hire the same property manager. Maybe they're already doing a really good job, and they're going to want to keep that property in their portfolio. That will then stay, right? They'll be able to keep that in the portfolio, keep it on the same platform, keep the same management in place, and now all of a sudden you're just going to plug in and use them. And so that's an option, but it's not the end of the world to start over either. I think a lot of people think it's a lot harder to start over and build those reviews than it actually is. It's almost never a concern of mine when I have a top property that we buy that has a lot of really good reviews and a good reputation, and we do plan on changing. It's not ever a worry, because we built them up so fast, and we know how to build a really good listing and optimize a listing really quickly. So don't let it be so intimidating if that's not it. Use the assets you have, and then go start building your new ones.
Perfect. Okay, buddy. Good episode, man.
That's it. All right.
it.
Let's wrap it
Good
up.
job.
So, guys, you guys know we always appreciate your time. We know how valuable it is, and it's always fun that you spend it with us. If you know anybody else that would like to be a part of these conversations, share the show. Give us a thumbs up, like it, review it on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. Those things really do help us. We don't run ads or sponsorships on the show because we don't want people telling us what we can and can't talk about or what we should be liking or not liking. And so the only way this show grows is if you guys share it. And the final, most important thing that I ask you at the end of every episode is do me a favor and go pick that one thing you can do today. Start building that life you don't want to take a vacation from. Cheers, my friends. Cheers, brother.
Cheers.